This conference will now be recorded.
I apologize for the late start. There was some miscommunication about starting time. I'm Kumirovich. I'm publisher for IET Journals. IET stands for Institutional Engineering and Technology. I have been with the IET for the past 8.5 years, and I will talk today about I'll give a little bit of an introduction into the IET, into our activities, into our mission, and then I'll move on to how to get published, the main workshop, and then I'll conclude by talking about the IET Journals and sort of explain and give a little bit of a background in terms of how you can publish and participate in our activities. But first of all, before I start, I would like to give my thanks to iGroup for organizing this workshop, and it is a great honor for me to represent the IET. So thank you. IET is a non-for-profit organization. We are a membership organization, and we have a long history. We were founded in 1871. We are also one of the largest engineering institutions. We have nearly 170,000 members in about 150 different countries. We have 6 offices around the world and about 4,000 volunteers who are given the time and expertise to help further our activity around the globe. So we provide thought leadership. We provide advice to government and other agencies. We safeguard professional standards for engineers and engineering. You may be aware that we actually publish standards. This is one of our activities. We provide professional homes, and we are very proud of that, to be a professional home for engineers and technicians. And we deliver the first-class knowledge. So our mission statement, I'm just going to move here. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'll move back. So our mission statement is to inspire, inform, and influence the global engineering community, supporting technology innovation to meet the needs of society. And this is the entrance to our head office in London. Okay, so in terms of delivering first-class knowledge, we are a leading learning society, and we have several products, including IET Inspect, which is our research discovery database with over 80 million abstract records. Inspect Analytics. This is a dynamic tool which was built on top of the IET's renowned Inspect database. We have a very active books program, so with about 550 ebooks available through our digital library, and also we add about 75 new books every year. Journals, so this is my domain. We have currently 45 journals. The program has grown from about 24 journals when I started 8 years ago now to 45 journals. Last year we got about nearly 25,000 submissions, published about 7,000 articles. So our aim is to deliver impact for authors, for researchers and research. So our focus is to publish high quality research and to help our authors achieve global reach, worldwide authorship and leadership, and to also we focus on quality, service, and impact as well. So our journals are indexed in sort of all the main databases, including obviously IET Inspect, IEEE Explore, Citation Index, Google Scholar, Scopus, and EA Compendex. I would like to tell you a little bit more about our journals archive. So we have actually content which goes back to 1872, and there is a part of archive which sort of spans over 140 years from 1872 to 2012. So this is the content that you can basically subscribe on our digital library. but also we currently offer free trials, free access, and you can talk to my colleagues in sales to be able to help you with that. But this is basically a wealth of basically knowledge that we as a kind of as a society, publishing society and as an institution, that we are sort of proud to have in our database. So there are about 145,000 full text articles, and including some really groundbreaking articles by engineering pioneers such as Marconi and Edison. And content types include primarily literature, journal articles, conference types, but also book reviews, commentaries, and discussions and editorials. So please go to the Digital Library and take a look. Sorry, so I'll move on to the main bit of my presentation. I do have quite a few slides, so I'll try to go through them as kind of in a way that hopefully it gives you sufficient insight in this limited amount of time, and I'm happy to take any questions, and also I'm happy to basically answer any questions. So if you ever ask yourself, I know you come from an audience, basically I had a look at the list of all the participants, and I can see that you're at the different stages of your career. So for some of you, obviously you're experienced and have published in scholarly journals. Some of you perhaps are at the start of the career. So I'll try to make this basically interesting and useful to everyone. So some of the activities that we get involved into is, for example, obviously publishing and dissemination. But while we do that, we also provide a quality assurance. That means content has been peer reviewed, somebody has looked at it, somebody has commented on it, provided advice before this content was published. Obviously, we have editorial boards and editors to ensure that this content is basically being properly checked and it's a good science. We obviously edit the content, we organize information in journals, in books, in databases. We offer, as I said, peer review management. We also add additional level of control for plagiarism detection and plagiarism checks. We also, as you know, we commission content. We invite people to submit to us. We buy journals. We start new journals. So, our activities are basically numerous. And also, we are trying to engage with our scientific communities around the world and support the scientific community around the world. So all this can be boiled out to one question. Whatever we do, we ask ourselves, how does it advance science and scholarly discourse? So some of the activities can be basically separated into 4 distinct activities levels. So academic publisher is a facilitator of innovation. I kind of found that somewhere when I was researching specifically for this workshop, and I thought this is basement. This is true. And as part of that facilitation, we support funding. So publishing helps funders assess quality of research and also identify some emerging research area. Publishers support and improve research activity through peer review and other contribution. We make research accessible, searchable, discoverable. As you know, when we publish online, we basically organize this information, but we also, use tagging and use technology to make basically research discoverable. And we develop platforms, tools, collaboration management. So you're probably all aware about some of the publisher-led initiatives like Crosscheck, Crossref, Crossmark, ORCID, and FundRef. We also provide research and discovery and semantic enrichment. For example, a good example for that is our Inspec Analytics database. We preserve content through archiving, so there is a dark archive for clocks. There are other dark archives, but one of them was used ones. So also what's really important for the authors and for researchers, when you publish in our journals, we help you establish research primacy, but data stamping the precedence, ownership of your idea, of your approach, of your finding. So, you know, for example, your research has been published on this date, and then anybody else who follows after you has to basically cite this research. And as researchers, publishing is crucial for career progression, reputation building, and future funding. So, how to get published? Why publish? That's kind of an important question. Then where would you publish, and how, and what do you need to publish? So, as I just said, researchers need to prove their work and the value to wider scientific discourse. The core kind of publishing process in academic journals, subject to your work and your results to peer review process, which then basically this publication helps you advance your career. And obviously, as a researchers, you'll be also actively involved in peer review process and assess somebody else's work in the same way. You can decide to publish in journals or conference proceedings, but also now in repositories, for example, like archive. There are advantages and disadvantages of publishing in either. Excuse me. Journal publication has a higher reputation and are more likely to be highly cited. Conferences are more immediate, offering an opportunity to have real-time discussions with international research community, with industry. Journals, obviously, if you submit to a journal, highly reputable journals will reject a high number of research that gets submitted to them. But conferences will provide, and for conference, obviously, in pre-COVID times, that is obviously you know, travel and sustenance and other costs that you have to cover. So it is really important that as a researcher, you're very confident about your chosen journal, and that journal have a suitable profile among your peers and enhance your reputation. That will also raise your professional profile, that will help you progress your career. Also, journals, you know, when you look at the journal, you probably want to know where the journal's been indexed. Is it been archived? Is it easily discoverable? Has it got an impact factor? Has it got a side score? And then also, as an author, you should expect a professional publishing service from publishers. And if you don't get that, then obviously there is a good reason not to publish with, because publishers ought to kind of raise your concerns and or also kind of share your experiences sometimes in scientific communities. But I'm sure that you all have good experiences, or majority have good experiences when you're working with academic publishers. So obviously, types of journals. There are still subscription journals around, obviously, despite of kind of drive towards open access. So this is where libraries pay for access. Open access journals, which are supported by funder fees, by funder grants, where author is basically meant to find the way to pay for article processing charges, which are part of open access journals publishing. Then there are hybrid journals, which basically are subscription journals, which allow open access publication. They're kind of journals that are sort of helping this transition towards open access. And again, letters, which are sort of published short papers, rapid communication. For example, we have 3 letter journals, including electronic letters. Again, as I said before, you know, when you and I'm trying to be neutral in this presentation, so I'm obviously put on this slide. I've included some of the journals from other publishers as well, because obviously there are thousands of journals out there, and you obviously need to find a journal that's closer to your research. You know, if impact factor is driver for you, for institution, which often is, then obviously you would look at the impact factor. You know, what is the reputation of the journal and scientific community? And really important that who is the editor-in-chief, who are the editorial boards, to actually they're publishing the journal, how they support the journals. And then also turnaround times. All publishers, including us, are constantly working in terms of improving our turnaround times, which is becoming easier with sort of digital publishing. So how to publish? First of all, and this is perhaps the bit which kind of gets sometimes neglected, but it is really important that you read the guidelines. And publishers are now becoming a lot more flexible in terms of, requirements, and in terms of the structure of the paper, not necessarily the structure, but the formatting of the papers, and in terms of word and figure count. But that sort of started offering flexibility, but nevertheless, and especially when you publish in a subscription journal, it's really important you read all the guidelines, that you stick to word and figure count, that you format the paper, that you include a covering letter. This is always a good idea, regardless of where you submit your paper. Do sort of offer covered letter, and most importantly, disclose any previous submissions to conference publications. And if publisher requires you to include those with your paper, please do so, because if you don't, and for example, we run your paper through plagiarism software, and it sort of comes up with something that's been published somewhere else, like for example, conference proceedings, will query this for you, probably reject it in the first instance. So it's really important that you're basically upfront and that you show how your paper that you have submitted at this point builds on your previous work. It's important that you do actually stick to formatting if this is required, that your paper has been proofread. Often there are some agencies that basically offer pre-submission peer review process, which actually enhances your chances of actually getting published in a journal if somebody actually looks at your paper before it gets published and before it gets entered into the formal peer review process for the journals. And then, if there's supplementary files, repositories, often, publishers now, it's more common for publishers basically to encourage submission of supplementary files and to provide ways to do so. So if you are as an author of the paper, so in order to be kind of that you can claim that you're an author of the paper, so you put your name on the paper. What this means basically that you have made a very substantial contribution to the research, that you have helped draft, revise the paper, that you've involved in signing off the final version, and then you become accountable. So as an author, accountable for your paper, for accuracy, integrity of research that you have presented in the paper. Also, before I move on, I just wanted to kind of make you aware of predatory journals. And I know experienced researchers who have basically been a victim or have been actually targeted by predatory journals. So these are often journals who have basically just established themselves under false pretenses. They have pretend editorial boards. They claim to be indexing all the databases and they're not. And they often sort of ask you for money to publish in those journals. So there is basically a website, a really useful website, another publisher-led initiative called Think, Check, and Submit. And I have included the link to that website at the bottom. But this basically helps researchers identify trusted journals for their research, and they have a range of tools and practical resources for international and cross-sector initiatives. And it's basically an educational tool. So I would urge you actually to visit this, because you can't imagine how easy it is to fall a prey to a predatory journal. So the way you would recognize them, they have an exploitative business model, which is charged for publication fees without actually receiving editorial publishing services. Even they put your paper through without the peer review process. They are of poor quality, and they often basically put people on the boards, claim that various people are on editorial boards, and they're actually not. And so normally the other thing that they tend to do is basically they don't reveal their true location. There's usually a PO box, or they take or they sort of basically steal bits of somebody else's website and put on their website. So from that point of view, they are easily to be recognized. So now we're moving to the main part of this presentation, and this is sort of how to publish. And sort of, I'm sure that all of you have been involved and published at some point. So when you are structuring your manuscript, you know that there are elements which a scholarly manuscript has to include, and this is title, abstract keywords, introduction, methodology, results, discussion, findings, conclusion, and references in the end. So, title is really important, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about publishing in digital age and why is it so important that you get it right. So, title should answer the question: is this article relevant to me? It should grab your attention and should describe the content of paper, using the fewest possible words. So it shouldn't be a long, you should avoid having very long titles. They should be basically really concise. And then don't use jargon or don't use symbols in your title either. Abstract, on the other hand, is obviously a shorter piece, part of, longer part of your of your paper. But again, it is basically summary of what your paper presents. So don't use more than 250 words. Has to be written in the past tense, and you can use keywords and index terms. So answers questions: what you did, why you did it, how the results were useful, and why they're useful and important, and how they will move the field forward. So this is basically your whole article in a condensed form. Introduction. So this is a kind of wider background information of the problem that you researched and that you're now presenting in your paper. So it should include some prior studies or reference to the prior studies to provide historical context of your research. So what research are you building on? Your hypothesis and an overview of the results, and then basically explain how the article is organized. So you will write introduction, present tense, and propose a solution to the problem in the introduction part. So methodology is basically problem formulation, and it shows the processes that you use to solve a problem, to prove or disprove the hypothesis. In methodology, it's advisable to use illustration like tables, figures, and graphs to clarify idea and support your conclusions. In results and discussion bit, first of all, in results basically summarizes all the data that you use. Again, needs to be clear, concise. You can use again figures and tables with narrative to illustrate your findings. While discussion basically is interpretation of the results. So why your research offers a new solution and how it can benefit other researchers and professionals. We come into conclusion. In conclusion, you basically explain, you provide, and you suggest. So you would explain what the research has achieved, how it relates to the problem stated in the introduction, revisits the key points, include a summary, provide benefits and shortcomings of your research. So basically you say this is a solution, you present your solution, and then you kind of explain your research methodology, summarize your research methodology, and then basically you suggest future areas of research and how basically the research that you present in the paper moves the field forward. References are really important, and I know some editors-in-chief who, when they receive the manuscript, first of all, they go to reference list, and generally there is no limit to the number of references unless you obviously submit to short article or letter article. In a normal research paper, you would need to be basically, it's always a good idea to include extensive list of references, which shows reviewers, it shows editors-in-chief and editorial board that you have done for research, that you're fully aware of what research happened before you started your research, which means that that bit of research that you did is basically shows a novelty and also shows the soundness as well. So all publishers generally require reference to be in certain way or certain information, certain formatted in certain way, but normally they will do this for you. Well, they will ask you to provide all the relevant details, author name, article title, year, volume, page, GOI. Please do that because obviously you want your own research to be also referenced in a proper way so that it gets accredited and it sort of contributes towards impact factor as well as your age index. I want to conclude this bit with a few words about sort of digital publishing, as I said at the start. So I want to say a few words about search engine optimization for your article. As I said, it's really important to sort of to write your title of your article in a way that is basically concise, that basically describes in a concise way, the research that you're presenting in your papers, at the same time that it's also engine-friendly, search engine-friendly title. So use some keywords in your title that are relevant to your topics. The other thing is optimize your abstract. So repeat your keywords, for example, 3 to 6 times. And then again, use keywords throughout the articles because this is, you increase the chances of people finding your paper. So keywords also important for A&I services as well, as you know, because as I told you, we have Inspect database. So we need to basically, when you're sort of looking for keywords, you can do some research on Google Trends and Google AdWords, and this is basically what publishers are supporting and suggesting the authors do. Keywords need to be consistent with your field, be consistent throughout, and then obviously include the relevant links in URLs. I'm going to now say a few words about the social media. I realized the social media channels that I mentioned here might not necessarily available in certain parts of the world, but generally what we find that researchers use Twitter, LinkedIn, blogs, Facebook. We also promote our journals for Twitter and LinkedIn. Then there's also specific researcher relevant basically social media channels such as Mendeley and ResearchGate, and obviously in China and some other parts of Asia, WeChat is also used as well to a great extent to promote research and to communicate research. So the next bit is about metrics. So I don't know if there are any questions at this point, or shall I just continue?
Please continue. We can have the Q&A later.
How much time have I got left?
You still have probably another 35 minutes.
Excellent. Okay, I shall be able to finish this. Thank you. Okay, so I'll take a few words about the metrics. I'm sure that you're all aware of impact factors, that when you sort of consider publishing in a journal, you actually look at its impact factor. One of the kind of simpler definitions of impact factor is a measure of the frequency with which the average article in the journal has been cited in a particular year. You know that impact factor is derived from Web of Science, which is a product by Clarivate Analytics. So Web of Science lists the journals, or also sometimes this is basically the database, kind of wider sort of index is called Science Citation Index and Science Citation Index Expanded. This is where basically these are the lists of journals which fall into those categories. It means that those journals have an impact factor, but it also means that you can find them through Web of Science. Basically, it was created in 1965 by Eugene Garfield, who is founder of the Institute of Scientific Information. Originally, it was basically created in order to help librarians select journals. But then it has sort of been transformed into this sort of important metric, which is often used as a proxy for quality. There are all sorts of issues with impact factors and metrics because it's applied across different fields, differently fields move. Some of them were faster, like medicine, biology fields. In some of them, research, it moves in a slower rate. For example, mechanical engineers, so mechanical engineering, and I worked in both fields, and I saw how, for example, in mechanical engineering, that you would often basically cite papers from 1965, 1975, just because they're so important and they're still valid as a sort of research. While this is not the case in medicine or biological sciences, where research is moving much faster, and therefore those trends, citation trends, are kind of citations that derive from that are much higher. So it's not basically fair that there's one metric used for all the different subject fields. However, this is the fact, and general impact factor is usually applied, and we still, as a publisher, we do spend all our time and efforts into improving our citation levels for our new journals. We work very hard into getting our journals indexed in Web of Science, which means that obviously they will have an impact factor. And I have included below citations, calculation, how you actually calculate the impact factor. Basically, it's 2 years worth of content that then gets cited in a one year window, and then gets divided by the number of published papers in those 2 years, and this is basically how you get an impact factor. Then also there's another metric which is kind of gaining in prominence. This is site score. This is one of the metrics which was basically created in Elsevier in 2016. This year they have basically changed the way how they calculated this metric. It used to be based on 3 years worth of research. They now changed to 4 years. Also, you will find that there are more journals that have site score and they have impact factor. So it's kind of worth also being aware of this metric and also taking into account when you're selecting journals. And then there are several other metrics, and I've just basically included a few. There's a 5-year impact factor, which I think it's a much more realistic way of determining the value and the quality of a journal, because it includes 5-year worth of content. Then journal immediacy index, which, how much is this journal cited in the current year. Eigenfactor, again, this is the number of citations journal received in a 5-year period, but it also looks at sort of where those citations are coming from. For example, if there's a journal with a high reputation, high impact factor, citations in those made in those journals are much more valuable than journals with a low impact factor and low reputation. Then there are sort of article level metrics like article influence. This is basically eigenfactor score divided by the number of articles published in the journal, so it shows how impactful the journal as a whole is. And again, a couple of other, so all of the above are basically based on science citations, while the last two, image journal rank and source normalized impact factor per paper, are derived from the Scopus Elsevier's Scopus database. Both are also basically prestige metrics, show basically it looks what is the citing journal and how influential the citing journal is, and then the more influential the citing journal, that means then more value is assigned to those citations. Then in addition to sort of traditional metrics that I've just been through, there are also alt metrics, including citations from Google Scholar, PubMed citations, bookmarks, Mendeley from and Cite You Like, mentions in Wikipedia, discussion on social media, newspaper articles. So they're also basically measuring the impact of your research. So this was the bit of metrics, and then I would like to now move to another important area, which can actually make or break a career. And I want to spend a few moments talking about that. And then obviously, if you have more questions, I sort of you can ask me later. But publication ethics and observing the publication ethics and adhering to publishers' plagiarism guidelines, any sort of ethic guidelines, this is really important. This is even more important than adhering to author guidelines and formatting your paper. And so basically, what is ethics? So this is a regulated ethical requirement and community-led publications. So it means how you cite other work and how it treats stakeholders in the peer review process, which means that if you're a reviewer, you have certain obligations. You cannot share some of the research or appropriate somebody else's research, or you cannot basically steal anybody's ideas. If you have submitted an article, you have to properly cite all the research that you have basically based your article on as well, and sort of ensure that when you write it, that you have not actually taken somebody else's idea and presented it as yours. So when as an author, you have to obligation to ask yourself, does the research I publish stand up to scrutiny in the peer review process? And publication ethics are based on integrity, on reliability, reproducibility, and trustworthiness. So what does this mean, basically? There's a text copied verbatim from another published work. This is a copyright infringement, and this is also an issue of novel contribution. So if you've taken somebody else's work and you just sort of taken it and not sort of cited it, this will be picked up and very easily picked up by plagiarism software. But we're also picked up by reviewers, by our editors, and according theory, obviously, our contribution. So you need to always clearly state what your paper is based on, whether it's a conference paper, thesis book, whether it's your own, your friends, or another colleague in the field. And so you clearly need to signpost the novel elements of your work. So you said, you know, this is what happened before, this is what was researched, this is what was published before in terms of the research, but this is my novel contribution to this work. You have to clearly state that. And so, for example, when it comes to flexibility, so we expect there will be some text overlap in introduction methods, but results, discussion, conclusion must always be your original work. So you are not allowed to be submitting your paper to same paper to a number of different journals at the same time, because the papers will get rejected. You will get basically flagged as somebody who is trying to basically game the system, and it always has to be at one journal at a time. Otherwise, you waste time of publishers, you waste time with your colleagues who are actually reviewing your papers. What we also frown for is adding and removing authors during the review process. When you submit your paper, you need to be very clear that you have included all the authors that have contributed to the paper. And you must obtain permission for use of any content you've already published, and it includes figures and tables. This is for all the papers that have been published under the copyright. Obviously now, because of open access, things are a little bit more flexible in this respect, but you always need to basically check if an article has been published in open access, is widely available in the domain, it can be accessed. You need to basically check what are the terms of this particular license, what you can reuse, and you should always cite, however, you know, regardless of whether the paper has been published open access or under the copyright. Okay, so there are a few main points about ethics, which are really important. I think they're sort of easy to remember, and they are usually clearly stated in publishers' guidelines when it comes to ethics and plagiarism. So I'm now moving to the final part of my presentation of my this webinar, and I want to say a few words about publishing with the IET. Obviously, I talked about publishing in general, and everything I said generally applies to all academic publishers. So we basically made a big step earlier this year when we signed the partnership contract with John Wiley, which I'm sure you all know is a big international publisher. And under the terms of the publishing agreement, we will be transitioning our 27 subscription journals to fully open access from the 1st of January next year. And they will be joining our 17 existing open access journals. With the IET, we'll continue owning, we'll have the ownership, we'll continue having the ownership of all our journals. But Wiley will be providing the PDF system for us, and the journals will be published on Wiley Digital Library in a special hub called IET Technology and Engineering Hub. So we have taken this step because we believe that open access serves our community and allows our researchers and practitioners around the world immediate and free access to our content. And basically it drives and increases the overall impact of the published research. So we'll be also making one of our main objective is to become a leading open research, open science publishers, and as a part of this objective, we'll be also making all our journals which are published from 2013 onwards freely available on Wiley platform from next year. And this is basically the journals that are currently available under sort of under the copyright. So I've just basically mentioned that we are in the basically our objective, our strategic objectives to become a leading open research society, or basically open research is the same as open science, probably the terminology that you're used to. So just to say a few words about open research, it sort of embodies the best research practices because it opens results, protocols, and other aspects of the research process which are not necessarily available in your traditionally published papers. So this kind of helps towards increasing interoperability and transparency of research. So open research basically puts researchers into control and encompasses tools, but also people and practices. It supports the future of science, which is equitable, open, sustainable research and culture-led. And as I said, basically, researcher is in control. And open research is influenced by changing researchers' behavior, especially researchers who are now used to, with a kind of availability of online publications, to basically freely share the research either on social media or to send it to their colleagues. And often, as a part of that, even when paper or journal is published as a subscription and the subscription model and all the content is copyrighted, we find that it's sort of widely shared. It's widely shared with ResearchGate and everything else. But then, you know, our next step is generally kind of decided, well, the way to support this changing behavior and changing research practices is to basically make the content open. So open access basically is a business model, like subscription access is a business model. And it basically means free online access to books, journal articles, monographs, conference proceedings. It frees up the content of copyright and licensing restrictions, and also no barriers to access. You just need basically access to internet and you're able to read open access research. Open access allows research to be disseminated quickly and widely, and a business model that facilitates, and open access, as I said, is basically a business model and facilitates open research, open science. Generally, benefits of open access publication is a greater public engagement, immediacy of research. The research can be immediately read by anybody in the world, so basically your audience becomes much larger, offers more visibility for the authors as well as the institution, increases citations. Lots of studies shows that open access basically increases the citation as well as downloads. it offers kind of ability to collaborate widely, and you're more likely to publish as an open access that somebody will notice your work from other parts of the world and say, well, you know, I want to collaborate with you going forward, and also complying with funding mandates around the world, which are increasingly requiring open access publication. So, moving now to our portfolio of journals. So it says that we have 42 journals. I'm sorry, we have actually 45 journals. So 27 hybrid journals, which will be migrating to full open access, as I just said, and then 17 golden open access journals. We cover all areas of engineering and technology, from power and energy to communication to transport, healthcare, manufacture. Our recent additions to our portfolio include journals of quantum communication, on energy conversion and blockchain. Our articles are basically published on ITL and currently on IEEE Explore, which will obviously from next year, this will change, it will go to Wiley. And they're indexed in all the main databases, as I previously mentioned. And we, our published output and our submissions have been growing year on year. And we have continued basically maintaining the same sort of rejection rate, which is obviously the sign of our focus and reflection on our focus and quality. So this is currently all our open access journals. Some of them we have launched in collaboration with some of the key institutions and universities in China, including the China State Grid. One of the latest additions to our portfolio is energy conversion economics, and also the blockchain. But as you can see, there is kind of a wide range of topics, including some of the hot topics, like for example, smart grids, smart cities, healthcare technology as well. So I'm always interested, as I said, in terms of how journals perform in sort of 5-year periods, and this gives you a better kind of an indication on the kind of quality of the journal, on the citation levels, and also basically brings up some of the articles which are kind of seminal, important articles. So based on this analysis, we can see that one of our highest cited journals is generation, transmission, distribution, especially when you compare it with the overall number of published articles. This is then followed by electronic letters and control theory and applications. However, these sort of high citations, 5-year trends are not necessarily reflected in the 2-year impact factor. So this is our current impact factors. And basically shows that the highest impact factor of 3.894 is basically renewable power generation, which is a journal which is in top quartile, and followed by high voltage and control theory and applications, which are all around 3. So the other ways of looking at the impact and citation is to look at basically contributing institutions in terms of citation trends. So we can see, for example, the sort of blue columns, it shows Web of documents that are basically, this analysis is done on Web of Science data. So this is the number of published papers and then kind of number of citations that those papers have received. So for example, at the first place is Indian Institute of Technology and Systems, which has the highest number of citations for the content that was published in IET Journals over the past years, followed by Chinese Academy of Sciences, Southwest University of China, and then several leading universities in China, including Tsinghua, Zhejiang, and Beihang University. At the last sort of place is in this analysis is Aalborg University in Denmark. Aalborg University contributes a lot to our renewable power generation research to publish in our relevant journals. Nature have recently published basically their reports. So I looked at another way that we obviously the publishers measure their impact and they benchmark ourselves against the overall trends and against what other publishers are doing as well. So I compared our top contributing institutions from the previous slide with Nature Index, sort of emerging contributing institutions, top rising institutions in physical sciences. Again, this is a 5-year trend. And then you can see some overlap. For example, University of Cass. Cass is in our top contributing institutions in terms of citations, in terms of impact. And as you can see, it's at the top of Nature Index. And then obviously we have Tsinghua University and some other universities that are basically in both lists. But as you can see, kind of the sort of highest cited, highest impactful institutions are generally are all based in Asia. So, just to conclude, the one way that you can all contribute to research, not just to the IET, but generally to the volume and to the body of scientific research is by becoming a reviewer. As a publisher, we often have difficulties finding reviewers because there is more research getting published, getting produced and submitted for peer review process. But obviously, fuller review is not necessarily increasing, or people are getting more busier. So, but it is a rewarding, basically, activity. So, and I've just outlined here a number of ways that you're rewarded by being a reviewer. It gives you a chance to contribute. It will give you a chance to contribute to the quality of scientific publishing. You can read and access new research before it's been published. You're helping the research community. You basically advise on how to improve the quality and impact of their work. It gives you an opportunity to give back to the process that's actually helping you, because as a researcher, you are basically also enabled, a peer review process also enables you to get published, and then it will advance your career and reputation. It will open opportunities. So we often look at our most active researchers and we tend to invite them to join the editorial boards. So if you're interested, send us your CV, your details of interest, and any question, and we'll be very pleased to have you as a reviewer. So this concludes my presentation, and please ask any questions. Jennifer, are there any questions, or is there any questions I can see?
Yes, there is a question from Nini Ming. He's asking, let me check. How many indexes are there to detect about fake journals?
How many indexes are?
To detect fake journals.
Or how many detect fake journals? Well, this is kind of quite an interesting thing. If you know, when you are basically, if you're trying to submit your journal, if you're a publisher, and if you're kind of fake publisher, and you try to submit your journal, that will be thoroughly basically scrutinized, and it's very unlikely that any of those journals basically pass these controls. So I think that all indexes, all like Clarivate Analytics from Elsevier, and including Inspect, obviously the ITS Inspect, we would not be, it wouldn't be possible for any fake publishers or any predatory publishers to get into our systems. Okay, any other?
Yes, there's one in the chat box from Patrick. He's asking if a researcher published an IET conference paper before, and she has some new research finding and want to publish it as a new journal article. She will cite her conference paper content in her new journal paper. How much new findings in terms of percentage should be included in a new journal article for successful acceptance?
I think we normally basically ask for about expansion by about 30%. That's just kind of general sort of increase in terms of volume. So basically, I can provide some more detail. You know, Patrick, you're very welcome to email me directly, and sort of I can provide more details. But from the top of my head, is sort of generally when we ask people to expand it by about 30%.
Okay, Patrick, does that answer your questions?
Oh yes, but the main question is this Patrick's. This is about some of the researchers. Suppose they publish a lot of conference paper before, but they want to upgrade his publication to journal articles. So that's why sometimes it's how much additional works they should have put in their new potential new paper. Because some of them get rejected because they cite too many of this previous work in their conference paper, and the reviewer or the editor just reject them because there's no significant additional content on this on this journal paper. That's why they want to know how many percentage will be accepted by IET in case they want to upgrade their conference paper to journal paper.
Yeah, well, I would say, you know, as I said, about normally guidance is about 30%. If you look at kind of regular research papers, it's about 8 pages long. And, you know, it has to include all those elements. So specifically in terms of results and finding and discussions, this is where you actually really need to expand your paper when you are, you know, expanding your conference. Because conference is often kind of preliminary research, and then you would go back to the lab and do some additional, you know, research. So those findings need to be really added.
Yeah, because some of the researchers is some of the decisions whether they would publish another conference papers on top of this previous conference paper, or publish another new journals article, say another one. That's why some of them are struggling about these options.
Yes, yeah. I mean, as we said, obviously publishing in journals gives more reputation, and then you benefit from all the kind of indexing and everything else that you don't normally, you know, and from wider dissemination as well if you publish in a journal, which, yeah. So I think that's sort of, yeah, we do get lots of papers that get, you know, are built on previous research that was presented at conferences, and this is perfectly valid way to go.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very good.
Oh, okay, you're welcome.
Okay, there's another question in the chat box. How does the journal get its impact factor? If let's say a journal is a Q2 Scopus index, is it possible to get its impact factor?
So yes, basically the two databases, Scopus database and Web of Science, and obviously Clarivate Analytics and Elsevier, they're two different companies, and we have some journals which are basically in Scopus, which have a quite high ranking in Scopus, and some of them are new journals, but they're not actually, haven't got an impact factor yet. So the journal to get an impact factor, basically it requires regular publication, it requires high level citations, so basically it's competitive within its field. So we often, like for our new journals, we're constantly looking at our citations and trying to predict what the impact factor would be based on you know, the other journals which are indexed in Web of Science. So we have to look how it compares. There are lots of journals, basically Web of Science have high number of volume of journals that get basically submitted for them to indexing. So they take a long time. They're also quite stringent, and they're basically constantly comparing your journal with other journals that have already been, you know, accepted as well. The Scopus, they do also have really stringent requirements as well. You have to wait, if it's a new journal, you have to wait for 2 years worth of publication before you can actually apply to Scopus, and it goes through the same kind of stringent process, but they're a little bit more open, and sort of you get higher side score marks simply because they use 4 years to determine the sort of the citation and side score rather than just 2 years. So we do sort of we have constant kind of conversations with our colleague and Clarivates, but you know, they do tend to take time, so it's not an easy way. So even if you fulfill all the requirements, regular publication, international authorship, international editorial board, all of that, minimum number of papers that you need to publish per volume, it's still very difficult to get an impact factor.
Okay. There's another question from Rance Elwin. What will happen to the researcher who published the same research article in 2 journals? What is the sanctions and who will determine it?
It will be, so let's say that, for example, we have found that you have published article in 2 journals. We will first of all look at normally what publishers publish, basically submission date, acceptance dates, and publication date. We would look at basically where was this article submitted first. If it's on at the same time, then we basically look who accepted it and published it first. So, for example, let's say that we found that you have published your article somewhere else in some other journals by other publishers as well as our journals. And if we published it first, we will go to the publisher and basically tell them, look, this article has been published, and we have published it first, and obviously, this is kind of unethical behavior. You need to do something about it. Most of the time, for reputable publishers, both publishers will actually retract the publication as a problematic, and you will be notified. We, for example, comply with the COPE, Committee of Publication Ethics, and basically all the big publishers are part of COPE, which means that you will be likely, if you do it again, you will basically ban from publication in our journals, for example. This is the approach that we would take. We will perhaps, we will add it to our database as well, and sort of next time you submit the paper, we will be very careful and kind of try to see if you submitted paper anywhere else. But basically, often it happens once your article gets retracted. It is a big offense, and if you do it again, then obviously you're not able to publish it. Definitely will be published with the IET again. Hopefully that answers the question. This is why I sort of said when we get to this section that you have to be really, really careful around ethical issues.
Okay, there's another question. How do you determine the level of exposure when publishing with conferences?
So this is kind of, that all sort of depends on the conference, and the exposure is then to the kind of people who have participated in the conference, who have heard you talk. Then, some of the big conferences also publish their proceedings as well. For example, as you know, we publish, the IET publishes proceedings, IEEE publishes proceedings as well. Those proceedings are available, for example, Scopus, index proceedings, and sort of a science, but again, it's a little bit more difficult to get into both science conference proceedings. So you could actually also, for example, if your proceeding has been published, let's say with IET, it will go into your compendex, it will be indexed in, obviously, InSpec, it will be indexed in Scopus. In Scopus, you'll be able to actually measure citations for your research as well. It depends which conference basically you participate in and what the agreement the organizers have in terms of publishing the conference proceedings.
Okay, thank you. There's another question regarding book chapter. The question is, are the book chapters through Elsevier Springer publications included in the index? Should we all consider publishing book chapters?
Right, okay, I can't tell you whether you should publish it or not. Basically, Scopus now indexes IET's ebooks, but I'm not sure that they basically index it on chapter level. Basically, they kind of index probably all the content. They must index it on chapter level. I'm going to claim a bit of ignorance here as well. I can find out. So there are kind of ways to sort of get your your chapters or your book contributions indexed. However, Elsevier Springer, I'm not sure what exactly they do with their book as well. I'm sure that they also kind of end up in Scopus as well. In terms of whether you should be publishing or not, that's kind of really up to you to sort of to decide whether this is something that you want to do and whether how useful it is for your career and what you want to do. But if you email me, I'm happy to do a little bit more research in terms of where the books are being indexed and get back to you.
Okay. Is there any more questions from the floor? Right. Okay, there's Corona, there's a lot of participants asking whether they can get a copy of your presentations today.
Of course, yeah.
Your PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. So I will share with you guys, once I get the PowerPoint from Corona, I will email to you all, okay?
Okay. That's great, and I have included my email address as well. So if you have any specific question, feel free to contact me.
Okay. Okay, if no questions, I would like to, on behalf of iGroup, I would like to thank Corona for giving us a very insightful presentation today. And thank you everyone, apologize for the lateness, and thank you everyone for being staying with us to the end of the presentation.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you, Corona. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.